Inside your gut right now, there is a city of 100 trillion bacteria. That is 10 times more cells than your entire body contains. These bacteria are not passive freeloaders. They produce roughly 70% of your immune signaling. They generate the compound that kills colon cancer cells in their earliest stage. They control inflammation across your entire body. They even regulate the chemicals your brain uses to feel calm. Here's what Stanford published in 2021 that most physicians have not integrated into their practice. By the time you reach 60, the diversity of this internal city has collapsed by roughly 40%. 40%. The protected bacteria are dying off. The inflammatory ones are taking over. And one specific bacterium, the one most strongly linked to long lifespan, has dropped by 75% in most adults over 60. Your doctor probably has not measured this. Not because the test does not exist, because gut microbiome analysis is not standard of care yet. The clinical guidelines have not caught up. The food research, however, has. I am Dr. Laura Candy. Today I am showing you the foods that rebuild your internal city, the single worst food for your gut after 60, and the exact 10-week protocol the Sonnenberg lab at Stanford documented produces measurable diversity recovery. In my 15 years of clinical practice, I have watched the gut microbiome go from a fringe topic to one of the most validated areas of senior medicine. Stanford built the Sonnenberg lab specifically to research this. Harvard launched the Microbiome Initiative. Mayo Clinic now offers microbiome testing in some of its longevity programs. The science is no longer debated. The clinical integration is, most adults over 60 have never had their gut bacteria measured. Most have never been told what foods feed the protective populations. Most have been advised in ways that actively harm the system without anyone meaning to. If you are over 60, pay attention. What I am about to share affects your immune system, your cancer risk, your inflammation levels, and even your mood, all from the same internal ecosystem. Here is what most people do not understand about gut diversity. It is not just about how many bacteria you have. It is about how many different kinds you have. Think of your gut as a rainforest. When the rainforest loses biodiversity, it does not just become a smaller rainforest. It becomes vulnerable to anything that wants to take over. The remaining species crowd out the ones you need. The protective layer thins. The whole ecosystem becomes fragile. That is what is happening inside most adults after 60. The rate of loss accelerates with each decade. The window for recovery narrows, but it does not close. The Stanford data showed measurable recovery in adults in their 70s who shifted their food patterns. There is one food I will reveal at the end of this video. Stanford's data on it is unambiguous. Almost everyone watching this consumes it. Many consume it daily. Some consume it 3 times a day, and it directly destroys the very bacteria that protect you from cancer. The first item is fermented foods, specifically kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, or unsweetened yogurt with live cultures, 2 to 3 servings daily. A serving is roughly 2 tablespoons of kimchi or sauerkraut, or 4 to 6 ounces of kefir. Here is what happens at the cellular level when you eat fermented foods. You are not just adding good bacteria. You are doing 2 things at once. First, you are introducing living bacterial strains directly into your gut. Second, those strains arrive already packaged with the metabolic byproducts they produce, which feed the bacteria you already have. Think of it this way. Imagine your rainforest has lost dozens of species. Fermented foods do not just plant new trees. They drop entire microhabitats into the soil. The existing trees become healthier. New species can find footholds. The whole ecosystem starts rebuilding. The Sonnenberg lab at Stanford published the landmark study in 2021. Researchers gave older adults 6 servings of fermented foods daily for 10 weeks. Clinical studies showed measurable increases in microbiome diversity, along with reductions in 19 different inflammatory markers. 19 markers. From one dietary change, there is a sourcing rule that matters. The fermented foods that work are in the refrigerated section of the grocery store. They contain live cultures. The shelf-stable versions, the canned versions, the pasteurized versions, these have been heat-treated. The bacteria are dead. The probiotic effect is gone. Read the label. If it says contains live and active cultures, it works. If it does not say that, it does not. The second item is prebiotic fibers. Garlic, onion, leek, Jerusalem artichoke, sometimes called the allium family, a clove of raw garlic, daily, half an onion, raw or lightly cooked. Leek as available. Prebiotic fibers are not bacteria. They are the food that bacteria eat. Specifically, they feed the strains that produce a compound called butyrate, which kills colon cancer cells in their earliest stage. Without enough prebiotic fiber, even good bacteria you introduce starve. Think of it this way. If fermented foods plant new trees in your rainforest, prebiotic fibers are the rain that keeps them alive. Nature Review's Gastroenterology published a 2017 meta-analysis showing that regular prebiotic fiber intake roughly doubled the production of protective bacterial compounds in older adults. These compounds are what your gut wall absorbs to keep its lining strong. There is a critical preparation step with garlic. When you crush or chop fresh garlic, you trigger a chemical reaction inside the clove. The active compound forms over the next 10 minutes. If you cook the garlic immediately after crushing, you destroy the precursor. If you wait 10 minutes, then cook it. The active compound is preserved. Crush. Wait 10 minutes, then use it. That is the rule. The third item is the food that feeds the most important bacterium in your gut. That bacterium has a long Latin name. You do not need to remember it. Just know this. Of every bacterial species in your gut, this one is the most strongly linked to long lifespan and to slower cellular aging. After 60, most adults have lost 75% of its population. The food that feeds it is pomegranate, and to a lesser extent, cranberry. Half a cup of pomegranate seeds daily, in season. Frozen is acceptable, or 4 ounces of unsweetened cranberry juice as an alternative when pomegranate is not available. Clinical studies showed that older adults consuming pomegranate polyphenols daily increased this keystone bacterium roughly 4-fold within 12 weeks. The ISME journal published the data in 2019, 4-fold. From one fruit added to the daily routine, think of this bacterium as the keystone species in your gut rainforest. When it thrives, every other beneficial species benefits. When it collapses, the whole ecosystem tilts toward inflammation and disease. Now, those 3 items rebuild the protective populations. Fermented foods deliver new bacterial strains. Prebiotic fibers feed the ones that produce protective compounds. Pomegranate restores the keystone species linked to long life, but the next 2 items work differently. They are not rebuilders. They are protectors. And item 5 is the one almost no one talks about in mainstream gut health advice, even though Mediterranean populations have been using it for thousands of years without knowing why. The 4th item is dark-colored berries, specifically blueberries, half a cup daily. Wild blueberries are best. Frozen is fine. Here is what blueberries do that most other foods cannot. The deep blue and purple pigments in the skin are called anthocyanins. When you eat them, they reach your colon partially intact. There, they specifically feed a bacterial group that produces compounds strengthening the lining of your gut wall. Why does the gut wall lining matter? Because as you age, the lining thins. When it thins, microscopic gaps open between cells. Bacterial fragments leak through into your bloodstream. This is sometimes called leaky gut. The leaked fragments trigger inflammation throughout your body. Think of the gut lining as a security wall around a city. When the wall is intact, it keeps the wrong things out. When it thins and gaps appear, the wrong things come in. Your immune system has to deal with each leak. Eventually, it gets overwhelmed. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition published a 2019 study following older adults eating half a cup of blueberries daily for 6 weeks. Clinical studies showed beneficial bacterial populations increased by 35% and the gut wall lining measurably strengthened. If you are over 60, pay attention. The aging gut wall is the silent reason for many of the chronic inflammation symptoms older adults attribute to other causes. Joint pain, brain fog, fatigue. Some portion of all of these traces back to bacterial fragments leaking through a thinning gut wall. The mistake people make with blueberries is cooking them into muffins or pancakes. Heat above 45 degrees Celsius destroys most of the anthocyanin content. Eat them raw, in yogurt, on their own, or thawed from frozen. The 5th item is extra virgin olive oil, 2 to 3 tablespoons daily, cold use only, drizzled over salads or vegetables. Not for cooking. Here is why olive oil works on your gut specifically. The compounds that matter are called oleocanthal and hydroxytyrosol. Together, they do 2 things at once. They suppress the growth of inflammatory bacterial strains. and they feed the protective species, including the keystone bacterium I mentioned earlier. This is unusual. Most foods either feed good bacteria or kill bad bacteria. Olive oil does both simultaneously. The Microbiome Journal published a 2020 study analyzing the gut bacteria of Mediterranean populations who consumed olive oil daily versus those who did not. The olive oil consumers had significantly higher microbiome diversity, lower inflammation markers, and higher keystone bacterium counts. Think of it this way. Olive oil is your rainforest's natural pest control system. It does not just feed your trees, it also keeps the invasive species in check. The catch is sourcing and use. The active compounds break down when heated. If you cook with olive oil, you lose most of the polyphenols. Use it cold, drizzled, not as a cooking medium. Extra virgin is also non-negotiable. Refined olive oil has been processed to remove most of the polyphenols for shelf stability. Read the label. If it says extra virgin and lists a harvest date, you are getting the right product. If it says just olive oil or pure olive oil, you are getting the wrong one. And here is the food I told you about at the start of this video. Stanford's 2021 data showed that consuming this single category reduces beneficial bacteria by an average of 43%. Most adults watching this consume it daily. Some consume it 3 times a day. And the food is not what most people would guess. It is not sugar. It is not bread. It is not fast food. It is artificial sweeteners, aspartame, sucralose, saccharin. The compounds in diet sodas, sugar-free yogurts, sugar-free gum, zero-calorie sweetened drinks, and most low-calorie processed foods. Here is what Nature published in 2014 that almost no one in mainstream nutrition advice has integrated. Artificial sweeteners change your gut microbiome composition within 1 week of consumption. They reduce beneficial bacterial populations, increase inflammatory strains, and disrupt the balance Stanford documented as critical to immune function. The Stanford follow-up in 2021 confirmed the effect in older adults specifically. 3 diet sodas per week was enough to measurably reduce microbiome diversity over 10 weeks. 3 diet sodas per week. Most adults trying to manage their weight, blood sugar, or calorie intake reach for sugar-free products. They believe they are making the healthier choice. They are not. From the gut bacteria's perspective, artificial sweeteners are more disruptive than the small amount of real sugar they replaced. Think of artificial sweeteners as wildfires in your rainforest. Real sugar is a drought. The drought slows growth. The wildfire burns species down to the roots. The rule is 0 artificial sweeteners during the protocol. No diet soda, no sugar-free gum, no protein bars sweetened with sucralose, no yogurt sweetened with aspartame. Read the labels. The artificial sweetener will be in the ingredients list. If you crave sweetness, the alternatives are small amounts of real fruit, a teaspoon of raw honey, or natural sweeteners like monk fruit or pure stevia in their unprocessed forms. None of these disrupt the microbiome in the way artificial sweeteners do, because they are recognized by your gut as food rather than as a chemical signal. If you are over 60, pay attention. This single change may matter more than any of the other 5 foods combined. You can do everything else right. If you drink 1 diet soda daily, you erase most of the protocol's benefits within a week. Quick check before the protocol. Make sure you are subscribed. 1 more video after this in the series. The final one might surprise you the most. Here is the complete 10-week protocol the Sonnenberg lab at Stanford documented. The one that produces measurable gut microbiome diversity recovery in older adults. Morning, half a cup of fermented vegetables, sauerkraut or kimchi, alongside breakfast, plus 4 to 6 ounces of kefir unsweetened with live and active cultures. Breakfast itself, half a cup of fresh or frozen blueberries with a handful of chia seeds or nuts. The fruit feeds your protective bacterial populations directly. Midday, a salad with 2 to 3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil drizzled cold. The polyphenols feed the keystone bacterium and suppress inflammatory species simultaneously. Include 1 crushed clove of raw garlic, prepared correctly. 10-minute wait before consumption. Evening, a fermented beverage like unsweetened kombucha, or a second serving of fermented vegetables. Variety matters here. Different ferments deliver different bacterial strains. Throughout the day, half a cup of pomegranate seeds in season, or 4 ounces of unsweetened cranberry juice as a substitute. 10 weeks. That is the documented window for measurable diversity recovery. Here is what most people experience along the way. The first 2 weeks, the protocol can produce mild digestive adjustments, some bloating, some changes in bowel patterns. This is normal. Your microbiome is shifting from one composition to another, and the existing bacterial populations are protesting the change. Do not stop. The discomfort resolves. By week 4, the digestive adjustments resolve and energy patterns begin to stabilize. Sleep often improves around the same time because the gut and brain are more connected than most physicians acknowledge. By week 10, immune resilience and inflammation markers measurably improve, and most people notice fewer minor illnesses through the following winter season. In my 15 years of clinical practice, this is the most consistent intervention I have used for patients dealing with recurring infections, unexplained inflammation, mood instability, and elevated cancer family history. The blood work barely captures the underlying problem, the microbiome does. And the food restores it. One red line. Artificial sweeteners. 0 during the protocol. Not even 1 diet soda per week. Stanford's 2021 data showed that even a single artificial sweetener serving per week erases roughly 30% of the protocol's diversity gains. The chemistry is unforgiving on this one. There is no workaround. There is no occasional exception. The rule is binary. That is the protocol. That is the science. And that is what most physicians have not been trained to walk you through. If this video helped you understand something your routine appointments never covered, subscribe to the channel. One more video in this series, the final one. Drop your age in the comments below. Tell me which fermented food you are starting with this week. Many adults have never tried kimchi. Many have only had pasteurized sauerkraut. The right products are easier to find than you think. Tomorrow is the final video in the cellular renewal series, and it might be the most surprising one I have covered all week. Your brain has its own internal cleanup system, separate from your immune system, separate from your gut. It only works while you sleep. After 60, its efficiency drops by 40%. And what that means for your dementia risk is not what most people expect. Tomorrow, do not miss it.